Alright, today's lesson is 3-6 and our objectives are to write a compound inequality from a given graph, to graph solution sets of compound inequalities, and to solve compound inequalities with one variable. You don't have to write this information down even though it says to, because you should have it on your notes from yesterday. It's just your and your or and your set notation for those. So if you need to refer back to those other notes, that's fine. All right, go ahead and make you a quick sketch of number 1, of the number line for number 1. And it says write the compound inequality shown by the graph. So we're basically going to look at the graph, decide whether or not it's an and or an or graph, and go ahead and write the solution set for it. So this one, since it's shaded on the outside, means that it's an or compound inequality. So we need the or set notation for this. And if we look, it's either less than -4 from here, or it's greater than 2 from here. So we're going to say x is less than -4, or x is greater than 2. And notice these are both open circles, so there is no extra mark underneath your inequality symbols. And if you look back at your set notation for or, this is correct for that. It's less than -4 because it's going to the left, so x is less than -4. The word or for your or set notation, and then it's greater than 2, so x is greater than 2. Make sure you have that copied down before you move on. All right, here's number 2. Again, go ahead and make you a sketch of the graph. This time what we're looking at is an and graph because it's shaded in between 2 points, or on the inside, so it's an and. So we need to look back at our and set notation. And with my and set notation, I have my squigglies, my x such that, then my x is in the middle with my 2 less than symbols. All right, then we're going to look back up here and notice that both of those circles are closed, so that means I need the extra mark underneath my less than symbols. And if I look, it's in between the -11 and the -8, and with the and set notation, it's always in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to put my -11 here, and I'm going to put my -8 over here. See if we can't make that look a little bit more like an 8. There we go. All right, take a minute, make sure you have that copied down before you move on. All right, so there's our first objective, to write a compound inequality from a given graph. So it gave us the graph, we decided whether or not it was an and or, and we looked at that specific set notation to write our compound inequality for it. Our next objective is to graph solution sets of compound inequalities. Number 3 says all real numbers between -3 and 3. So take a minute, go ahead and write that down, all real numbers between -3 and 3. Also go ahead, take a minute, make sure you have 3-6 solving compound inequalities written at the top of your paper to make sure that you have these notes labeled. All right, it says all real numbers between -3 and 3. So we have to think, do we think that's an and or an or? Since it says in between those two, it's going to be an and. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the graph for it first, and then I'm going to write the compound inequality. So I have -3 and 3, and it says, should -3 and 3 be included? Well, here it just says between the two. It in no way tells us that -3 and 3 should be included So they are going to be open circles, and they are not included because there's nothing in the wording that tells us that they should be. But between says all the numbers on the inside, and that's obviously an and if it's shaded on the inside. So go ahead and take a minute, get your number line written down. Alright, then I'm going to look at my and set notation, but first I'm going to write my inequalities for each one. This one is actually greater than -3, so I'm going to write x is greater than -3. Then I'm going to write my other one, and it says x is less than +3, because it's either greater than -3 or less than +3. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my compound inequality for an and. That means my x such that my x is in the middle with my two less than symbols. They do not have extra marks because, again, my circles are not shaded here. The numbers go least to greatest, so -3 on the left and +3 on the right. So we took the numbers that were described, we made a compound inequality graph, number line for that, and then we wrote the compound inequality. Take a minute, make sure you have both the number line and the compound inequality written before you move on. Alright, number 4 says all real numbers greater than -5 or less than or equal to -11. And this one's pretty easy to tell whether it's an and or an or because it actually has the word or in here. It's got the word or, so it is an or. So we're going to go ahead and draw the number line first. It's going to go from -12 to -4. So I'll give you a minute to make sure you have that copied down. You can pause the video if you need to. Alright, we're going to start with the greater than -5. So it's x is greater than -5 when I write it, which means it's an open circle and it's shaded to the right. Then it says or less than or equal to -11. So I'm going to go ahead and write that one. X is less than or equal to -11. This one, the circle is going to be closed because it says less than or equal to, so that one's going to have the extra mark. So the circle is going to be shaded, and it's going to be shaded to the left for less than. So this one is obviously an or, so we're going to use our or set notation, which basically just means you have your smaller number or the word or and then your greater inequality. So braces x such that x is less than or equal to -11 or x is greater than -5. Go ahead and take a minute and make sure you have the number line and the compound inequality written for that one before you move on. Alright, so there's our second objective, to graph solution sets of compound inequalities. Now we're going to look at 4 examples of solving compound inequalities with one variable. This is basically exactly like what we did in day 1. Okay, we just feel like you need a little bit more practice with that. So to refresh your memory, I'm going to go over problems 5 and 6, and then I'm going to let you try 7 and 8 on your own. So here's number 5. Go ahead and write that one down. It says -3 is less than or equal to x minus 1, which is less than or equal to 2. This one is an and because there is no word here, so we have to split it up into 2 inequalities. I'm going to go all the way from the very beginning until I hit the second inequality. So -3 is less than or equal to x minus 1. The word and then I'm going to go from the end of the first inequality all the way out. So x minus 1 is less than or equal to 2. From here, we're just going to solve each inequality individually. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides and get -2 is less than or equal to x. Then over here, I'm going to add 1, and I'm going to get x is less than or equal to 3. So now that I've solved both inequalities individually, I'm going to write them in my solution set for and. Again, my x is going to be in the middle with my 2 less than symbols on each side. These are going to have the extra marks because my original problem up here had the extra mark. My smallest number, -2, is going to go on the left, and my larger number, 3, is going to go on the right. So I've solved it, I've set it, now I'm going to graph it. So here's my graph. Take just a minute, pause the video if you need to get your number line down. All right, it's going to be a closed circle on the -2 and a closed circle on the 3, and it's an AND statement, so it's going to be shaded in the middle. So I've solved it, I've set it, I've graphed it. Now I'm going to check it. So to check it, I'm going to pick a number from the middle and plug it into my original problem. So I can pick -1, 0, 1, or 2, does not matter which one. I'm going to pick 1, so I'm going to say -3 is less than or equal to 1 minus 1, less than or equal to 2. Well, 1 minus 1 is 0, and 0 is in between -3 and 2. It's greater than -3, but it's less than 2. So my check is correct. Again, take a minute, make sure you have the solve, set, graph, and check completed for number 5 before you move on. All right, number 6. This one's an OR problem. It says 3a minus 2 is greater than 1, or 2a minus 5 is less than -5. This one, they're going to rewrite it again. Actually, no, they're not. Never mind. You don't have to rewrite this one because there's no way to break it up. You just need to solve each one individually. So I'm going to add 2 and get 3a is greater than 3. Divide both sides by 3 and get a is greater than 1. On this one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides and get 0. So 2a is less than 0. Divide both sides by 2. And a is less than 0. So I've solved my two inequalities. Now I'm going to write them in the correct solution set, and this one is an OR. So I have my braces or my squigglies and my a such that. Then I have a is less than 0 or a is greater than 1. Again, make sure that you don't just put this one here and this one there. They have to be in order least to greatest. So a is less than 1 is going on this side, a is greater than 1, or a is less than 0 is going on this side, a is greater than 1 is going on the right. So I've solved it, I've set it, now I'm going to graph it. This one's a little bit of a shorter number line. It just goes from -1 to 2. Give you a minute. Pause the video if you need to get your number line. Open circles on the 0 and the 1, shaded on the outside because it's an OR. So I've solved, set, graphed. Now I'm going to check. And to check this one, I'm going to check one number from the right and one number from the left since they're both shaded. When I check the 2, I have to check with where the 1 came from. So I have to actually check with this inequality. So I'm going to check with the 2 in the first inequality. So I'm going to say 3 times 2 minus 2 is greater than 1, which gives me 4 is greater than 1, which is true. Then I'm going to check with the -1 from this side, but I have to check with the answer that gave me, or with the inequality that gave me the 0, so I have to check with this one over here, so you have to be careful with your checks for your OR. We have 2 times -1 minus 5 is less than -5, which gives me -7 is less than -5, and that's a true statement. Make sure you have the solve, set, graph, and check written for this one before you move on. Alright, go ahead and write down number 7. 3x minus 8 is less than 28, which is less than 5x plus 3. Take a minute, pause the video, try this one on your own. See if you can solve, set, graph, and check. Alright, hopefully you've paused the video and tried it. Again, I'm just going to quickly go through here so that you can check it. Hold on. Alright, so again, this one's an AND. Go back and make sure that you split them up correctly. 3x minus 8 is less than 28, and 28 is less than 5x plus 3. Solve each one individually, and you get x is less than 12, and 5 is less than x, which it means that 5 is less than x is less than 12. Make sure that these are in the correct order. Make sure that you've shaded in the middle, and make sure that your circles are open. If you made a mistake, please go back and find where you made your mistake before you move on and fix it. Pause the video if you need to do that, if you need to pause and make corrections. Alright, then we're going to check. I'm going to check with 9 in the middle into my original. And my check, you should come out, if you check with 9, I checked with 9. Just make sure that whatever number you got, that it actually works. This number is in the middle of those two. So if you didn't pick 9, if you pick something else, your check will look a little bit different, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Alright, go ahead and write down number 8. Negative 4x plus 17 is less than or equal to 5, or 6x plus 3 is less than negative 9. Go ahead, take a minute, pause the video, and try this one on your own. Hopefully you've had a minute and you've paused the video and you've tried it. I'm going to go ahead and put up the answers. Go ahead and be checking your work. You should have gotten x is greater than or equal to 3, or x is less than negative 2. If you missed one of those, please go back through the work and figure out where your mistake is and fix it. Make sure your or set notation is correct. X is less than negative 2, or x is greater than or equal to 3. Make sure that this circle over here is open and it's shaded to the left, and the circle on your 3 is closed and it's shaded to the right. If you made any mistakes here, please pause the video, go back, find your mistake, and fix it. Alright, and here's my check. I checked with the 4 with this one because that's where I got my 3 from, so I had to go back to the inequality where I found my 3, which is this one over here, and I plugged in 4 and I got 1 is less than or equal to 5. And then I checked with negative 3 over here, but I had to check in this one because that's where I got my negative 2. When I checked with negative 3, I got negative 15 is less than negative 9. Make sure that you did all the steps. You solved it, you said it, you graphed it, and you checked it. And again, if you have any mistakes, please go back and fix them. Alright, so there's our last objective, to solve compound inequalities with one variable. This is the end of your video. Thank you for watching.